Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Phoebe Maltz Bovy. Phoebe, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I am the author of The Last Straight Woman. This is about how I am literally the last female heterosexual on the planet. And in addition to that, I'm the opinion editor at the Canadian Jewish News. I'm a contributing columnist at the Globe and Mail, and I am the co-host of Feminine Chaos with Kat Rosenfield. And I have the blog Close Reading the Reruns, where I twist people's arm into reading what I have to write about Britcoms that they are not necessarily interested in. But yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I'm a writer in Canada. How about that? Of American origin.
Well, thank you for coming back on. I counted how many times you've been on this program, and if my count is right, this is your ninth appearance on the program.
What? So that's a rank beyond like friend of the pod.
Yeah, a super friend of the pod,
Yeah.
lifetime, devoted friend of the pod, and we'll get to 10 hopefully at some point.
Then it's
But
a minion.
right, yeah, the 10th one is free. I don't know. Okay, so you were joking, but your new book, which just came out, and a link will be in the show notes for where people can get the book. The title is The Last Straight Woman. Subtitle is On Desiring Men. But the book is not actually about how you are the last straight woman on Earth or some sort of science fiction like, all the men were killed by a disease or something. And
That does exist as a book, but that's not me. No. No.
right. This is a nonfiction book about heterosexual women and their desires. So, but how did you pick this title, and has it been confusing people, or did you have to fight for this title? Why did you could have made On Desiring Men the title, or something like
Mhm.
that, a little more straightforward. Why was The Last Straight Woman the title you went with?
Oh, I have a lot on this. So some of this will require backstory, which is that my first book is called The Perils of Privilege. Privilege, for some reason, in quotes rather than scare quotes, even though nobody's being quoted. I had wanted it to be called Your Privilege is Showing, but reasonable people must have vetoed that at some point. I still think it should have been called Your Privilege is Showing.
Mhm.
And I guess I was a bit salty about that. So then I was like, this one's going to be The Last Straight Woman. And it's going to be a tongue in cheek reference to the increasing unpopularity of straight womanhood, both in the form of people who in other eras might have identified as straight women not doing so for a variety of reasons that I can unpack, but also people who are admitted straight women saying sort of like, unfortunately, I'm straight, like that sort of thing. And I do not identify with all of this. I am a straight woman who is unconflicted about this fact about myself. And I think there's a lot to be said, sort of politically, from a feminist perspective, for sort of accepting women's sexuality, whatever it is, for what it is, and that this needs to be a starting point of feminism, and that the sort of like just stop dating men types of arguments, just given that women are not about to do this, and that to ask women to do this is basically sort of right wing purity culture, but left wing, I'm against that. So, anyway, it's a reference, yes, in a way to myself, but not literally. It's by no means a memoir. It's not that kind of book at all. It is personal, though, in the sense that a tension that kind of goes through the book is I don't want to speak, obviously, for this absurdly huge population, right? And I couldn't even presume to. It's like there's straight women with my exact demographics who are very, very, very different from me in their straight womanhood. The obvious one being Nona Willis Aronowitz, whose book, Bad Sex, I write about in The Last Straight Woman. But also, I don't want to say that I'm this snowflake. You know what I mean? So it's this thing, right? Where I don't want to say I'm not like the other girls, but I don't want to say this is how I am and so are all of you. So yeah, it's from a first person perspective, but it's not a memoir. It's not tell-all. There are some embarrassing like stories from youth, but it's not really that type of book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
And nobody objected. I was going to say, like, this was the title I wanted it to be all along, and that's what it is.
okay, that's interesting, and it has a great piece of cover art as well. So people should go look at the link, which will include the cover art. And I
Yes,
think
that's Kate Sinclair designed this, and I met her actually at my book launch. She's fantastic. I sent via my editor, I sent her a mood board for this, for the cover. And the picture this is most inspired by is Amy Klobuchar with some firemen at a Minnesota State Fair in 2023.
yes,
And her very deadpan, sort of thirsty but deadpan tweet about it was like, you should check out the booth or whatever at the, anyway. So, yeah.
right. And if people, with that image sort of went viral a couple, 5 or so years ago, and if people vaguely remember that image and they see this, they might put it together. But even if they don't know that,
Oh, some have. Well, 2023 is not so long ago, and people,
Okay, yeah.
people have sometimes said this is reminding me of this Amy Klobuchar picture, and I'm like, there's a reason for this.
yes, and
Yeah.
you also you wrote an interesting and funny post on your Substack about the cover and about how you felt your first book. You know, you just trusted the publishing company to
Yeah.
make the cover, and it's sort of a more or less bland cover, and so you
It
had
looks
all
like an economics textbook. I mean, it's not offensive, but it doesn't convey the sensibility, the genre, anything like that. Yeah.
yeah, and you also list various things that you didn't want on the book cover. You can list some of them if you want, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't want it to be like, so another thing is an argument in this book, in The Last Straight Woman, I should say, is that women being sexual is not fundamentally about women looking sexy. I mean, they might not, but it's more about what women are experiencing. And I really didn't want this to be like, oh, it's a book about straight women. Here's an attractive woman showing her cleavage in a, in a lot of makeup, sort of like her finger seductively in her mouth, whatever. I didn't want it to be that, that would be confusing in light of what's inside.
right. And one of the phrases you use is frumpy but horny to describe a group of women that I guess you put yourself
Well,
in, or
yes, I could. So that's something we could talk about. Do I put myself in that? I relate to it, but I don't think I'm literally it, because I think that would be stolen valor. I think I am not the world's most popular. I'm not the world's least popular. I've been married quite a long time. In the ancient days when I was dating, I did not have trouble finding men. But it's a sensibility and it's an understanding of like where you kind of fit in the world. And I've always seen myself more as like the looker than the looked at. And it's hard, what I get at in the chapter called Frumpy But Horny, which uses a lot of sitcom examples, because it's very awkward to call real life women frumpy but horny. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it's out there, but it's like, and it's also very visual, is that like you can see on screen these examples of women where what they look like clearly either doesn't matter or is kind of a problem because they're not very attractive, but they don't care. Their aim with where men are concerned is not for men to say, oh, look how beautiful you are. It's to get the man that they find beautiful. And that's frumpy but horny.
okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. And you are not, I've met you in real life. You do not seem frumpy in real life.
I mean, sometimes, like we all have our days, but yeah.
Okay, well, I also just want to say at the top that this is a very funny book, and it made me laugh out loud, literally laugh out loud multiple times while I was reading
So
it.
I got the literal lol.
Yes, a literal lull, which doesn't.
Fantastic.
When one is, at least when I'm reading even something funny, I'm often not actually laughing out loud. It's where
Yeah.
if you watch a sitcom or something, you're more likely to laugh out loud. But reading, I've read a lot and written myself humor pieces, and often it's just sort of a internal chuckle kind of thing when something is funny. But no, I burst out laughing. I just burst out laughing. That's what the Gen Zers say, idgeable or something
really?
like that. Multiple times in this. in this book. It's legitimately funny. So, well, congratulations on the book, and congratulations on writing a funny book, which is
Thank you.
hard to
I
do.
appreciate that. And also I specifically appreciate that because I feel like sometimes I'm trying to explain it and I feel like I get stuck when this kind of like, well, in this book, I argue, and the thesis is, and it's not entirely that kind of book. And that's still to be written. Somebody can do the version of this that's in that vein, but that was not like, it is mainly meant to be entertaining. I don't claim to have like solved some kind of major problem that our planet is facing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not quite that sort of thing.
Right. And it's also, it's very voicey, and we, like I said, we've had multiple conversations before, so I could hear your voice coming through in it.
You could literally in the audiobook.
Oh, did you read
voice.
did you read the audiobook?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's great. Well, maybe we'll include a link to that.
Please do. Yeah.
Also. And so, okay, so one of the things that made me laugh was the title of the introduction to the book, which is Mrs. Slocum's Pussy. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, well, how does she, she's getting away, she's going wacky, she's getting away with something already. So, well, what is Mrs. Slocum's Pussy, and why did you decide that was the title of the introduction to your book?
Well, I didn't want to beat around the bush. Sorry. I wanted it to be that because what I'm trying to set up at the beginning of the book is a juxtaposition between how straight womanhood is generally understood and how I understand it in this book, right? So there are these two characters in Are You Being Served, which is a really funny, extremely dated, but sometimes in all the best ways, sometimes not, as it often goes with sitcoms. It's a British show, started in the 70s, went through to the 80s, stopped. Then they did a reboot in the 90s where it's these characters, they're in a London department store, and then suddenly they're like running a hotel in the British countryside. The reboot's pretty bad. But anyway, there's a young, very pretty woman at the women's wear counter, Miss Brahms. There's her colleague, her superior is Mrs. Slocum, and they're selling women's wear in a London department store. And it's one of these shows with a lot of catchphrases, a lot of kind of repetition, everybody's kind of a type. And Miss Brahms is always talking about the men who kind of won't leave her alone, who are always asking her out, who are always hoping to get a little something extra, after their dates. And Mrs. Slocum is a bit older, a bit strange looking. She has kind of like the Marge Simpson hair, but she's a real person. Mrs. Slocum, whenever something is mentioned about men who are pinching bottoms or being otherwise, inappropriate, she'll say something. It's very hard to sort of convey without quotes, but she'll say things where it sounds a bit where she's like, oh, me too, like in the hashtag Me Too sense. But then she'll be like, and where exactly was that? And which bar was that? Like, which pub did that happen in? And she's like taking notes because she wants this male attention. And my reason for writing about this is not to say that the Miss Brahms experience of being very pretty, very young, and, facing a lot of largely unwanted, but not only unwanted male attention, it's not that that's not a part of the female experience, but that the Mrs. Slocum experience of wanting more than you're wanted is more typical. Like, numerically, that is what straight women are, because except for this little bit of time and like your maybe teens to mid 20s, or ever, if you're particularly plain looking, like that's not your life. And I think that for a variety of reasons, the Mrs. Slocum experience does not get so represented. Now, why Mrs. Slocum's Pussy? Is this just me making something very lewd? No, it's because her catchphrase, among others, one of them is these double entendres about her cat, right? So she lives alone with her cat. She's a cat lady. And it's Tiddles, I think is the name of the cat. And she will say things about like, oh, it's raining buckets. My pussy got so wet, and like everybody will like gasp, but like she's just sort of, but they kind of like look a little like taken aback. Like, so it's, but this is in every episode, I think. And that is relevant to my book. Basically, Mrs. Slocum's Pussy is relevant to my book. It's not like I should be clear, it's not like an obscene book. There's no like photograph of like a spread eagle Mrs. Slocum. This is just like, it's, yeah. Anyway, that's all.
Okay, so the character to you in this dynamic is important because there's this idea out there that, and I guess perhaps the Me Too movement maybe highlighted this aspect or put this idea out there that like women's main problem when dealing with men is like batting them off or worse, trying to avoid sexual harassment or sexual assault, and sort of
And
like
those are real. I just to interrupt, sorry. Like
right.
that's all real. And as I like, something that came up on Substack recently in some posts or whatever was, somebody was commenting along the lines of like, just so you know, like young girls who are like, really young get sexually harassed, that there's rape in nursing homes and all of this stuff. And it's like, that is, I explain all of this in the book. This is true. Women who are not, 20-year-old supermodels deal with male violence. That's all absolutely true. There is nevertheless a certain sort of attention and a certain volume of attention that is unique to very attractive women, and that got discussed during the Me Too years as like how it goes for women. The most extreme example of this being Emily Ratajkowski's My Body, and just her general shtick, I suppose, of like, she's extremely beautiful, and her, sometimes very scary experiences with men, but also just the volume of attention she gets from men would be discussed in terms of like, well, that's just how it is for women. Now men can understand how it is to be a woman now that we've heard from this particularly attractive lingerie model. And you would get men being like, yes, now I know how it is for women. It's like, well, you know how it is for that woman. But yeah.
Okay, so do you make this joke that it's like hashtag not all women or something like
I
that?
don't remember.
Like yeah, and I mean there's like a lot of the things, the cultural currents that have happened like since social media started, like a lot of it is like people associating themselves with some larger thing and being like, here's this truth that affects all the people in this group. And I guess Me Too like embodies that just in its phrasing. Like women were saying, yes, me too. And like hashtag not all men, it's like a pushback against it. But there's something about like the way discourse happens or happened on social media, that it's like people put forth these declarative statements that are like, this is how it is. And then there's a lot of people like, yes, you've like, thank you. Like, I finally feel seen. You've crystallized it exactly. And then there's the backlash of people like, no, like, not, but what about XYZ? And yeah, so there's just the, I don't know, you're arguing for a multiplicity of perspectives to
Well,
some extent.
multiplicity, but also what I'm trying to get at is which is more commonplace. Because what happened with Me Too was that, like, experiences that women had that fell outside that framework could not be brought up anymore. So in the feminism that came before Me Too, there was a lot of discussion about unfair beauty standards, about how hard it is for women who are like over 30 or whatever to date, all sorts of things like this would come up. And then suddenly that just seemed very passé, and like, you just like, why would you even want men to be looking at you to, like, and if a woman said that she missed when men would whistle at her on the street, that would be like, well, then she's just some sort of pick me anti-feminist. You know what I mean? And I think again, I just keep coming back to, and this is in my introduction for a reason, like, how much of a woman's life does she spend with a physical presence that is just that irresistible to men? And it's not that these things don't affect women who aren't supermodels. Like, I'm an ordinary middle-aged lady, and I deal with things like this occasionally to public space, and it's unpleasant. But does that dominate how I think of my own heterosexuality? No. So, yeah.
So one of the main ideas that you're putting forth in the book is that the conventional or stereotypical understanding of like differences in the way men and women, straight men and women, feel desire or attraction, um, you take issue with them, and in particular, the idea that women want, um, like women get turned on when they are the object of desire, whereas men get turned on when they see a hot woman.
Hmm.
Can you?
And I argue in this book that no man has ever been turned on by seeing a hot woman and that we have it all wrong. And no, go on. Sorry.
Well, just yeah. Can you talk? Because I think that yeah, that I agree that that is some stereotypical understanding is that men want women and women want to be wanted. Um,
Hmm.
that's out there in the culture. So is that wrong?
Well, I think that it's true that men want attractive women on the whole, and that, so to speak, I think that so I once did a Substack post that I called intentionally, provocatively, and to be a bit silly, men and women are exactly the same. But the reason I wrote that, and in a way, the reason I wrote this book, is that I think gender discourse kind of keeps overshooting the mark in different directions. So I think there was in the 90s and early 2000s this thing that I called like gender neutral sex positivity, where people like to hook up, consenting adults, all of this, where it would be where just like sexuality was discussed in this gender neutral way. And I don't think that that served anybody that well because it's not gender neutral. Like men and women do have different experiences. But then what ends up happening is that can kind of overshoot the mark to point out the differences. And we've kind of landed in this weird place where the assumption is that women just want every space they're in to be kind of flirtation free, sex free, any kind of frisson free, whatever, I don't know. And you hear about like, well, it's good that there are dating apps now because otherwise a man might try to talk to a woman outside somewhere. And it's like, sometimes a woman wants a man to talk to her. Sometimes a woman wants to go up and talk to a man. Why I wrote about this also has a lot to do with things that I've thought about since long before I'd heard of such a word as discourse. Okay. And like, it was always supposed to be that men look and women are looked at. And I've just always been more of the looking person than the looked at person. I've always been very aware of what men look like and looking at them, not in some sort of like snarky way to be like, oh, that one's no good. But like the whole idea that women don't categorize men according to sort of would or wouldn't strikes me as, and again, gets back to that tension. It's false to my experience. There are, I'm sure, women who are sexually fluid in all ways, who could come around to liking anybody, who would be okay with there being nobody, whatever, and who are much more sort of easygoing about this. And their main interest sexually is being looked at, whatever. But it's not all straight women. It's not. And I think what I tend to push back against the most, it's not that I'm trying to say that all things equal, things could never be this way or that way, but it's whenever somebody starts talking about the inherent quality of female heterosexuality or female sexuality in general, and it's that word inherent that I think I really push back against, because there are things that have been described as like what it is to be a woman. And I'm like, well, that does not strike me as anything I have any experience of. So like the short story Cat Person in the New Yorker, Kristen or Kirsten Roupenian, one of those, she wrote it. It's fiction. It got discussed at the time as like, well, that's how all women, all young women experience intimacy with a man, or have experience. All women know what that is, to have that encounter.
Right. And just briefly for people
Yeah.
who
So it's
don't
that
remember.
it's a woman in college meets a somewhat older man who she finds physically revolting, but has a brief relationship with and sleeps with. And the way she sort of gets through it is picturing how aroused he is by how young and beautiful she is. And she's just kind of like holding her nose at the whole thing. And then, not to spoil a short story from 2017, he does not take no for an answer when they've broken up. So, and it was like the Me Too story, right? So even though it was fiction, it got discussed. Fiction, by the way, written by a woman who at the time had a female partner. She may still, I have no idea. It got treated as if it was like a real college student's personal essay when it was like a grown up writing fiction. But yeah, I don't like reading that things are how it goes for women. And that gets to why one of my chapters is also called Are Straight Women Gay Men? Because then there's this question of, well, if I can't relate to the female experience, does that mean that I'm just somehow outside of it? And the spoiler is no, I don't think so.
So this book is not a memoir, but you do include personal like anecdotes and sort of talk about things from personal experience and yeah, how you see things and how you don't feel yourself being described in sort of like generalities about women. How well have you thought maybe you yourself are like on one end of some sort of spectrum of feeling in a certain way? How has the reaction been to the book? Are there people running up and saying, "Finally, I feel seen," kind of thing, or how do you think about that?
Some people, yes, but I mean, I guess I don't feel like there's a certain type of person who's very invested in feeling that what they feel is what everybody else feels. And there's
Right.
another type of person who's very invested in thinking that they're different from everybody else. And I feel like I really just, on that spectrum, I fall in the middle. On other spectra, whatever, no, I don't. I think on the Kinsey scale, I'm extreme. I think my understanding of straight women is that probably I am more on the like more enthusiastic about men and less okay with a little this and that involving a woman than most. I think that's probably true. I also don't think that I don't think it really matters for the purposes of the book's arguments because when I talk about sexual fluidity and my doubts about, we could talk about this depending where the conversation goes, my doubts about the supposed science of it, I'm not saying that that it's so rare for a woman to have ever had a sex thought about another woman, to have ever hooked up with another. I'm not saying that that's like the world's most rare thing. I'm saying that it's not really meaningful if you're talking about how many women are enough interested in other women that they could have a female partner. You know what I mean? And I think that's just not that many. So even if you say like, okay, well, I'm sure there's some like a little bit of genuine interest there. If you meet a woman who's bisexual, 5% interested in women, she'd have to meet the right woman. You know what I mean? And by 5%, I don't mean 5% of the time. I mean like she's 5% as passionate about like, so the way I define sexual orientation is maybe a little bit different from how other people do, because I don't say that it's like what you'd be okay with happening, but it's that what you would be devastated if it didn't happen. And you get a lot of stories, including some of which I tell in the book, of women, straight women, who for different reasons give women a go. And it's just like they could either take it or leave it, or it's just not for them. And you could, if you want to make a female sexual fluidity argument, say, well, look at this fluid sexuality. You don't see men doing this. Fine. But like as a feminist strategy to tell a woman like that, why don't you just find a wife, doesn't work because they're just not very interested or at all interested in women.
Right. So you're pushing back against ban men feminism is the term you use, or this sort of idea that like political lesbianism or women swearing off men and not because they no longer are attracted to men, but as a either some sort of political statement about heteronormativity and the patriarchy, or as dealing with women who say dealing with men is so awful, like let's all be lesbians instead and our life will be easier. And women have said this thing to me, maybe not directly about me, but perhaps that has happened as well. It's like I have one friend in particular who has said to me multiple times, like it would be easier if I were just into women, and she had a conversation like this with a lesbian, and you talk about that dynamic that happens.
Apparently every lesbian gets just bombarded with this. The number of examples of this is quite remarkable. Yeah.
Yes. So you well, talk more about your why you think this is, this is not like the correct path for feminism or male female relations to go down.
Sure. So political lesbianism is such a fascinating term to me because I had always pictured it to be like a term for militant lesbians, for people who are lesbian as well as politically militant. What I learned doing book research is that basically, no, it was about women deciding for political reasons that they were going to have nothing to do with men. And whether or not they did anything with women, whether or not they found female partners, was up to them. It was just, you can't have a husband, you can't have a boyfriend. It wasn't that you have to be with other women. Something that I have found interesting in a lot of that sort of discourse is that you have a lot of these narratives that are basically like from women who are either late in life lesbians or sometimes, most confusingly, in the Julie Bindel case, all of her life lesbians, who will basically say like, well, I can do this. Why can't all women do this? If I can do this, surely this is just something all women are capable of. I'm saying it's something some women are capable of. I'm not saying that deep down all women are straight. I don't think that for a second. I think I'm not talking about this from certain sort of like evolutionary perspective. I would not be qualified to nor interested in it. I'm saying that people know themselves and sexual orientations are a thing to be respected and just they are like materially a thing in the world, and that like to advocate for effectively celibacy, like, yeah, you can do that, but then you're not any different from somebody doing that from the right. And similarly, this sort of dogmatic idea about female sexual fluidity does land you in very similar places to kind of right-wing positions to do with like conversion therapy. You know, if any straight woman could be a lesbian, then why couldn't any lesbian be a straight woman, you know? And I don't think either is the case. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very much for like defending not only the monosexuals, but not them. You know what I mean? So, like, I think if somebody says she's a lesbian, that doesn't mean that she's willing to make out with a woman at a party and then go home with her husband. I think if she means by lesbian that she's only with women, she's only with women. And same deal with straight women. I don't think that there's like a secret lesbian trapped within every straight woman. I think there are these narratives that I write about in the book from women who clearly are just functionally bisexual, whether or not that's ever the word they use for themselves, who say, well, I used to have boyfriends and now I have a wife. Therefore, all these women with boyfriends are choosing heterosexuality. That's how this gets written. They're opting to stay with heterosexuality. They remain attached to it. And that's where I came up with this idea about like straightness studies and sort of how there's this field of people who never felt comfortable with straightness, who would have at one point in their lives, because it's the case for all of us, default, identified with straightness, but who've experienced straightness only as an imposition in their own lives, as a false thing that's false to them. And those are the people who tend to study sexual orientations, understandably so, because that's who would be in that field. But then they talk about heterosexuality as if it's only this thing imposed upon anybody. And they miss, like, which is hard to miss in literature, like Anna Karenina, Romeo and Juliet, for example, like cases where somebody has opposite sex attractions that are not convenient. It's not like the head cheerleader and the whatever football quarterback going to prom.
There's this book that is it The Tragedy of Heterosexuality? Is that the title of the book?
Yes, by Jane Ward. And her earlier book, Not Gay, I remember really enjoying. It's very entertaining and informative about straight identified men and the circumstances in which they are not so straight acting. It also has this very racy cover. I remember when I've had this from the library being like, very aware of it in my house. But yeah, The Tragedy of Heterosexuality, I think it came out in 2020. I wrote about it for the Hedgehog Review at the time, and then I write about it also in The Last Straight Woman. And yeah, it's about basically how tragic the straights are. And Jane Ward is a scholar herself. She's, I think, a gender studies professor. And she, it's this weird perspective because she's saying like, it's sort of like, actually, I feel sorry for them. I don't feel oppressed by them. I feel sorry for them. And it's this weird thing where, like, I think she has every right to get together with her friends who are also queer identified and be like, are the straights okay? But I think that where she messes up is this, she takes this extra step of claiming that she's earnestly on a mission to make sure that the straights are okay. And there's this stuff about, like, she's judging people for, like, wearing khakis. It's very silly. You know what I mean? And she thinks that people are more interesting the more pronouns they have in their bio, or the more, not pronouns, that's the other, like categories. Like, if somebody says, like, demisexual, whatever, like, she's all into that. And I'm saying I don't think that that necessarily is how you define between interesting and uninteresting people.
Right. And there's, maybe this moment has passed, but there was sort of a time when being a straight woman, well, that's, like, that's boring and sort of like cliched or basic, or and like is a couple steps away from, like, being MAGA or something, or
Yes.
or very close to being a Karen, or in fact is a Karen. And so, like,
Even though that's in other contexts a very queer-coded hairstyle. But yes, go on.
that's true. Yeah, and just like, so sort of like the coolness slash like social signifiers slash trendiness of these things, in which yeah, it was like looking down upon someone who's basic or white bread, or something like that. But maybe we move past. I'm not sure
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. So I don't have a couple different ways of answering this question. I'm trying to think what's best. I mean, timeline wise, I should say, like, I started thinking about this as something with sort of book potential around 2020.
Mhm. I remember
started,
talking to you about that.
yeah,
You had this idea, and I
yeah,
don't want to take any
yeah.
credit at all, but I think I said something like, "Yeah, you should write this." Like, just like write it up.
Well, I think you should be listed as co-author. But definitely, so I started looking into this for a variety of reasons that are not really relevant here. I started writing about this in 2013 for publications for The Atlantic and The New Inquiry. So actually, the publication that ran the piece on heteropessimism, which I did not write, I am in awe of that coinage. Um, that came out in 2019. I was writing about straight womanhood, including, yeah, The New Inquiry, starting in 2013 on my own blog, starting, goodness knows, like 1800 or whatever. But yeah, but like for publications, and then I wrote something about straight women and them not wanting to be basic, or us not wanting to be basic. I don't know. Is it a them or an us? Because I don't mind being basic, but I am a straight woman, so it's complicated. But yeah, so that was in 2016.
So some people identify as basic, and some people identify as non-basic.
Yeah,
NB.
yeah, or acidic, I guess. So yeah, basically, so to speak, I have been writing about this for really, really long, and a lot has changed in this field very recently. 2024, Trump's back. There has been a real backlash against both actual LGBT people, and with that, this kind of, like, it's not so trendy anymore to be, like, amorphously queer as it might have been even like a couple of years ago. So that's something that I wrote about actually for the Globe and Mail. I did like a op-ed, kind of book tie-in op-ed thing a couple of weeks ago, and kind of bringing it up to the present. And I was writing about a couple articles that had appeared actually in a Brown University student paper by a writer who's a transgender woman herself, basically talking about sort of the faux bisexual, what she called them, like non-practicing bisexuals or something like this, and how that was really a thing. And then a year later, not so much of a thing because of kind of two phenomena happening at the same time. One is that it's no longer chic to kind of pose in that way, which is arguably a good thing for actual gay and bi and trans people, that there isn't this kind of like imitation happening. But then there's also this kind of actual crackdowns on actual members of these groups from Trump and just generally in the culture, not a good thing. And these things are all interrelated. It's very hard to kind of sum this up in an op-ed or a podcast for that matter. But basically the point is the stats seem to be shifting from the little I've seen about this, where this has been measured. There was this spike in queer identification among younger people, and that seems to have somewhat reversed. And where it seems to spike and maybe reverse is young women saying they're bisexual. So one thing that there had been a lot of is like sort of discourse about like the they, them using individual who looks like a woman but has a husband. Anytime such a person exists, the discourse explodes. This is like 3 people. It's very few people. It's symbolically interesting. It's not a lot of people. Sounds like Jews, right? Like we're symbolically interesting, but not a lot of people. Bisexual women with husbands, this is a thing. This is numerically more significant. And my sense there is that, yeah, some of that was just people feeling free to be out who didn't in the past. Some of it is also these definitions of bisexuality that were more like not being opposed to waking up and being bisexual, which is a little different, I think, than actually being the thing. Regardless, to get back to the point, like, yes, I think things are turning maybe in a more conservative direction, which, while nice in the sort of immediate moment of the sort of it's okay to be straight thing, there's a bigger picture in which it's not such a good thing, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think something happened, like, to really zoom out and talk about like the kind of historical scope of this. There used to be this thing called the ally, and that went away, not because everybody who's straight suddenly hates gay people, but because like this concept of an ally just kind of went out of style. Like it used to be that there were the types of straight people, straight women generally, who would be at gay bars because that was just kind of where they hung out. But then there was this whole sort of discourse about how that's cultural appropriation, how it's not your space to be there, you know, and also a bunch of more sort of basic straight women got kind of interested in going to these sorts of things, bachelorette parties, whatever. It stopped being so niche. And then what started to happen is this kind of the rise, as I see it, of this more sort of like one drop theory of queerness where like you belong, where it became suddenly that if you could put yourself in any sense under an LGBTQ umbrella, you belong in these spaces too. So that could mean like a woman who has once had a sex thought about another woman. It could mean a woman who doesn't feel 100% girly 100% of the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you put yourself, like there's this divide, right? So that also comes up in the book. I feel like I'm saying too much about the book, but whatever. Where I talk about Taylor Swift and this New York Times essay that about like sort of the Gaylor thing, but it's like where the author wants Taylor Swift to be some sort of queer, but it's unclear which type, because it's both saying like insisting that she's secretly bisexual and also insisting that if she's with a man, she's faking it. And it's like, if she's with a man and she's bisexual, why would she have to be anyway? Regardless.
Right. I had forgotten about that piece, and that has to be one of the worst pieces that the New York Times opinion page has run in living memory. That piece was bizarre. And yeah, so there's some women who are not straight who want Taylor Swift to also not be straight for her various reasons. I mean, it's explicable in some ways. It's sort of like finding out that a Jewish person finding out that a celebrity is Jewish that you didn't know about. That
Absolutely.
kind of thing.
It's very much like that. And the Taylor Swift thing, what I think is so interesting about it is the idea that there's something kind of passive or unimpressive about her if you think that she's just singing about boys that she likes. Because look how successful she is. You know what I mean? Like, clearly that is working for her. She's doing great professionally. She's clearly not lacking in ambition. She has leaned in, you know what I mean? And yeah, her material is,
but if she's just a
boy liking,
but but there's something basic about like dating a series of men and having bad breakups and stuff like that. So if she was actually secretly gay, then it all becomes much more interesting. So getting back a little bit to how different or how similar are the way men and women straight men and women desire. Reading this book, I was reminded of something that happened. It happened when I was in college, so over 20 years ago. And my then girlfriend and a female friend went to go see one of the Lord of the Rings movies. And afterwards, we got out and we had all liked the movie. And the friend said something like, "Oh, and like Legolas is so hot." Legolas is the elf character, who is played by Orlando Bloom, who is, a good-looking man. I believe was married to Katy Perry for a number of years.
Right.
And
It wasn't he also with Miranda Kerr? Like yeah.
so yeah, he's done fine for himself. Though he hasn't been in that many good movies in
He
the
was
past
in
20 years.
I will put a pin in it, but I'm going to mention a role of his. But anyway, go on. Go
Okay,
on.
so she said, I'm 20 or 21 at this point. And she said, and Legolas was so hot, and I was like, well, Legolas, like he has like this long blonde hair. That's how he's styled in the movie. And I was like, that's who you liked? And she said, yeah, I mean, he was just so capable. Because there's these scenes where he's very good. He's an elf, and so he can do all sorts of cool stuff like walking on top of snowpack and stuff like that. And there's these scenes where he's really good with the bow and arrow, and you see him like in slow motion, launching bow and arrow and killing orcs one by one. So he's like the best fighter among our heroes of the Fellowship of the Ring. And so we talked a little bit more about it, and this woman was basically saying, yeah, his actions in the, it wasn't just how he looked, and he looks a little androgynous, at least by standards of 2003. But it wasn't just how he looked; it was like what he did and his demonstration of mastery of fighting and bowmanship or whatever and other stuff like that. And since then, I don't know if there's a reverse for the idea that women are attracted to men who are capable at doing something or even anything. Like, other women have said this is true to me, but I don't think there's a reverse of men getting turned on by a woman doing something like in a capable or efficient or like well done way.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of this?
Well, what I think of this is going to require a story from British television. Unfortunately, for those who feel like there's enough of that about. I once watched some kind of behind the scenes about Midsummer Murders, the long running, somewhat sort of dark comedy, but also cozy mystery series, where the actress who played the detective's wife for the first detective, who played Joyce Barnaby, talks about the casting of Orlando Bloom in one of the early episodes. And I think it was that she just thought this actor was very hot and got him cast. Orlando Bloom is a very good looking man. What I think this woman was picking up on was not the capabilities of the character, but that he's really attractive. And this is something I've thought about in terms of actors I've thought were attractive in different roles. And sometimes there's an actor who will be very attractive in a particular role more than in another. And people maybe women, I think women are probably less sort of strictly visual than men in terms of out of context anatomy. I don't think is as of much of interest on the whole to women. But I think what you're hearing there is this kind of retrofitting of an explanation for that which has no explanation. And I think this is sad in a lot of ways for men, because I don't think that men can decide as much as women can if they want to be hot or not. You know what I mean? A woman can decide if she wants to be presenting herself as a hot woman, to some extent. It's not infinite, but there are a lot of things a woman can do. Whereas for men, not really. There are certain things to sort of avoid, I guess, to maximize one's chances. But the man who does every possible thing with his hair, his eyebrows, his torso, whatever, will very quickly pass a certain threshold where he will either seem gender nonconforming or just eccentric. And this is not going to be appealing to the average straight woman. It's not going to be upping his appeal. You know what I mean? So I think it is harder for men. But I guess what I'm getting at is I think because there is this stigma on saying as a woman that you're attracted to what men look like, you get a lot of, oh, this man is very interesting when it's pretty shallow in the end, what's being noticed.
Okay, that's interesting. And he used the word maximizing, I think, which made me think of this whole
Maxing the the looks
looks
masters.
maxing thing, which has been part of our lives of people who read New York Times style section pieces for the past 6 months or so. And this one particular guy who seems like a sociopath who goes by
Oh,
Clavicular,
poor
who's a
clavicular.
streamer. So
Yeah.
so he's doing things like hitting himself in the face with a hammer to try to
Sorry,
like
I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh.
reshape
Yes.
his bones or like his cheekbones or something, and it's all quite strange. And in some ways it's like this guy is sort of doing to an extreme what women might do to try to make themselves look better, but like instead of using makeup he's like trying to reconfigure his
It's
bone
a hammer.
structure and stuff. I
Yeah,
guess he
a
needs
mallet
something
or
violent
something.
instead of
Yeah.
just applying makeup. But also the way he like his he to me, a straight man, he looks more or less like like a catalog model or something like that. And it doesn't seem like there's actually like the way he's behaving seems more like a gay man with body dysmorphia than a straight man who's trying to attract women. And there's this question: is this for women at all? Is this just a way to get hang out with your loser incel guys and like complain about women who are put off by your horrible personalities to begin with? And and this guy seems like he's mentally ill or a sociopath or is going to end up dead or something.
Yeah,
pretty
he doesn't
soon.
seem well. Which is why if he were not a sort of attraction seeking famous person, I would feel bad talking about it. And even knowing that he is an attraction seeking or attention seeking or both famous person, whatever, I feel a little bit bad talking about it. However, I did blog about him once because it really reminded me of this thing that the Daily Mail ran. It was a very viral piece from probably about a decade ago by a woman saying that people hate her because she's so beautiful. And her picture was right there in the article. And this woman looked perfectly presentable. As everybody on the internet pointed out, this was not a beautiful woman. This was a perfectly presentable looking woman. Whatever issue she has in her life, they do not stem from her being so extremely beautiful. Clavicular seems, well, it depends what it is he's selling. If he's claiming to be an extremely gorgeous man, he runs into the problem of being an absolutely ordinary looking, sort of late teenage looking young man. You know what I mean? Like he does not register as a sexy man. And what keeps happening, I think, at least I feel like this has happened at least twice, where he's in some sort of interview and the interviewer is just some kind of not strong silent type exactly, but just some sort of like normal seeming, somewhat symmetrical man.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
He was interviewed by like 60 Minutes Australia or something.
Yes.
And the guy who was interviewing him looked like a handsome TV
Yes.
anchorman type.
Yes.
And
Yes. And he
but
just gets so
maybe-
quickly outdone or mogged. I don't remember which direction
mogged
is
is the-
mogging.
is the stupid
mogging
slang.
is the okay.
But
So,
maybe part of it is
yeah.
that clavicular through like plastic surgery, hitting himself with a hammer. Apparently he like does meth so that he won't be hungry, so
good.
that he'll keep a trim figure. Like it took him a lot of work to reach that level.
Takes a lot of meth to look that good.
Exactly. Whereas the guy who ends
Yes.
up as an anchor on 60 Minutes Australia maybe just is like one of the handsomest men with a journalism degree
Well, that's
in
what I was going
Australia.
to say is that now I'm thinking so much about Ted Baxter on the Mary Tyler Moore show. But yeah, I think this was kind of what I was getting at is like, is the deal with clavicular that he's so good looking or that he tries so hard to be good looking? And I think it's probably the latter, because this might be the best. Like, I feel like I have to give credit to somebody who would not want to be now given credit on a podcast, but whatever. This might be the best clavicular can do, right? Which is not, but I think there is something that must be very hard for straight men where trying is off-putting, or being visibly trying to look nice is off-putting. And that's got to be difficult because male looks matter. But if a man is visibly trying to look nice, this puts women off a lot of the time. Now, there are different levels. Like, it's not that women are attracted to like the man who bathes the least. It's not at that level. But yeah, it's like it's feminine coded to be trying to look nice. So women deal with this a bit as well. Like the fantasy of the naturally beautiful woman, where you see like, it feels very new Twitter, but it was definitely on old Twitter, where there would be some picture of an actress with a ton of makeup on, and the man posting it would be like, see, look how beautiful Sydney Sweeney looks with no makeup. And, and she's got like giant like mascara, whatever, blush, whatever, all of it.
Because there's a sort of like incel misogynist thing about women wearing makeup in order to trick men
Yes.
into like getting with them when they don't deserve that level of man. That's sort of like a manosphere kind
Right,
of idea.
right. While we're on the topic of incels, I mean, something that I write about in The Last Straight Woman is that like there's this incel conception of who women are, not what women are like, but who is a woman, like definitionally, like all these discussions of who is a woman. I'm not interested in the like gender type discussion. I'm talking about like just that we're talking about the incel definition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the incel definition of a woman is a woman that they would like to sleep with. And that's why when you get the incel saying, no woman will have me, often what you're getting is none of the women that they want them. They do not literally mean that the planet is devoid of any woman who would want them. I think it depends. I'm sure there are people who are really like reclusive, like there's nobody. But I think that what happened, with Me Too, is that sort of incel definition of who women are got kind of embraced by feminism, that there's this subtype of person who the men want, and that's who a woman is. And just it leaves out a lot of people. But I mean, I think there probably are also some incels, hashtag not all incels, right? Anyway.
The good, there's some good incels out there, perhaps. And I think incel, the term was coined by a woman.
Yes.
And it got appropriated by this group of, low status or self-described low status men.
The weirdest thing about incels to me is how many, as I understand it, are like 15-year-olds. And in my day, there didn't used to be a name for it if you're 15 and not having sex. That was called being 15 and, looking forward to the future. It was not. Then I feel like you see something like no woman has ever had me. And it's like you see that the person's like, not a legal adult. It's like, well,
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
The best.
Yeah. But if there's, I think who are the people who like watch clavicular streams and like pay, either buy the supplements that he's hawking or whatever it is. Like it's maybe
wide world.
Yeah, maybe it's a lot of 16-year-old losers, but there's probably some 19 and 20-year-old losers as well who can't figure out.
But even that in my day, it was not, and I should qualify this, that I went to the University of Chicago, right? So like it was a little bit of a different place. But if you met somebody and they told you that they lost their virginity at like 23, you wouldn't be like, oh, you know what I mean? So I think some of this is just as is so often the case, context collapse of online, right? So you don't know who's like 40 and has this complaint and who's, played by Steve Carell in the movie, of course. And anyway.
Right. Or online discourse happens in this place where you don't actually, people are saying things where you're not sure who they actually are. And they might be saying something to get attention or saying something outrageous that in real life they would never say, or everyone would just walk away if they said it. Or...
That is one other, on the topic of straight womanhood, one place where the sort of disembodied online thing really enters into it is like, you can say you have any orientation online if you're speaking of the abstract, and it's not really tested by a real life in-person physical encounter. So I think that's another thing that's played into like the impression of straight women as declining could come from like, you can say anything on the internet and it doesn't necessarily test what you actually want in your life.
Yeah. On the internet, no one knows whether you're really a demisexual.
Exactly. Exactly.
To paraphrase a famous New Yorker cartoon, like you can, or you might be saying that just to get attention or because you want to belong to some group, or it's a passing fancy you have or something. So another thing that has been in the zeitgeist this year that I guess you finished your book before it all happened, which has a Canadian angle, is this heated rivalry
Mm.
phenomenon, and just how popular this show that it is. I didn't see it because I don't have. Wait, was it HBO or Netflix? So I did not choose to watch it.
I don't have the streaming service that has it,
Okay, so you
but I
haven't
can
seen
still
it, but there were
discuss it.
plenty. There's a lot of
Yes.
think pieces about this show that was based on a romance novel in which two male hockey players fall in love and have a secret affair, and what did it mean that the show was so popular and so many women love this? And you talk a little bit about like women who, well, women and women's relationship with gay men, uh, women who wish they were a gay man. What is actually happening when a woman watches or reads gay erotica, um, and
Sure.
yeah, how do you feel about this, especially after
Yes.
the
Yes. So the
phenomena?
heated rivalry thing, I wish this would have happened better times so that I could at least like somebody in a position I think like almost to make this happen suggested I do an op-ed about this, but I was like behind on other work and that never really quite I got it to it too late. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. And there were all these think pieces about how what it means when that women are such great fans of heated rivalry is that it's like the queering of heterosexuality. Much was made of the fact that women, when interviewed about why they watch it, would say they feel safe, they find it non threatening, it's not so patriarchal. Much was made of the fact that there was a lesbian audience for the show. Sports bars maybe were showing it, something like that. Like there was this kind of discussion about it, like it's showing that something very non-heteronormative is happening. What I write about in the book and what should be obvious if you live in the world is that, you know, men who find it attractive when two attractive women are involved with each other, that's just something straight men like. And that is known and that is not obscure. And nobody then thinks these men are tapping into their gay side if they watch lesbian porn, right? Like nobody thinks this. Lucy Neville's an interesting scholar whose work I quote in the book. Basically, she is both a producer of man erotica and a scholar of this whole thing. She finds that it's very popular, but she also and it's very much like of its moment. Her book is called Girls Who Like Boys Who Like Boys. It's actually one of at least two books with that title.
Right.
But she is very insistent that there's like something queer happening when this is happening, and really insistent that these are not all straight women. Some of them are, you know, maybe some are bisexual, some are even lesbian, although very, very few, whatever. And there's just this great desire to show that there's something not straight happening here. And I don't really buy that in the aggregate. I think most of the time when women find attractive men making out or more to be interesting, it is for the very simple reason that these are women who are attracted to men and they're only looking at the people they're attracted to. You know what I mean? Like to me, this does not seem complicated. And the idea that whenever women have any kind of interest, it has to be complicated puts me off. And also just so there's another angle though for heated rivalry, which again, like it pains me that this had not like the timing wasn't such that I could have included this in the book, but like there was this extremely 2010s think piece in it's in the book. I don't remember which publication this was in that like a rant about straight women writing man fiction, right?
Hmm.
Where there's and that this was doing a violence to gay men. And with heated rivalry, what was so complicated is the books are by a woman who has a husband, but I believe does not identify as straight. But then the show's creator is a gay man. So you have this complicated thing of like, well, you had there were a bunch of critiques of it that are from gay men that were like, well, this isn't real. This is just a straight woman or whatever thinking about this. But then because of the complexity of who brought this art to being, like, you can't really say that this is just a woman's idea of gay men. But also, at the end of the day, who cares? Because this isn't actually like the same thing could reach different audiences in different ways. Because I heard about this show because Dan Savage was talking about it on his podcast, and he was talking about it in a positive light. So it seems like the same art could, like, art or erotica or wherever this falls. Again, I haven't seen it, so I'm not really sure.
Well, there'll be a second season, I think, because
yeah.
it was so successful. So maybe by the time that's around, we
Yeah,
can
yeah. I mean,
catch up on it.
It could be reaching different people for different reasons. And the idea, but like what I just remember being so struck by with that sort of 2010s version of things was like that it's doing a cultural appropriation if a straight woman fantasizes about two men, even if these are fictional men. And there are no actual gay men being like roped into something. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I guess
And
I could see if, if you were a gay man who wrote a gay male erotica and, toiling away all your life, and then you see that the first mainstream hit gay male erotica was written by a woman, I could see how that would, you would get mad about some sort of stolen valor.
Well, sure. And that's why at the level of, so where I fall on this is I don't think that there should be like LGBTQ visibility awards given to either lesbian porn for straight men or the, what I mean, obviously in this case with heated rivalry, would there being, a gay man who's created the show, it's a little different. A gay Jewish man, apparently, because this has come up at the day job, right? So I believe he is a Canadian, or no, I don't know if he's Canadian, probably. Regardless, the show's Canadian. And what does come up sometimes, I don't think this actually ended up in the book, which is really weird because I thought it would have, but I think I just, in the end, I write too much and it doesn't all fit. But there was something that Kat and I have talked about on Feminine Chaos where a YA author had written some fiction about a gay boy and was called out for being a basic straight lady writing about a gay boy, right? And then she came out as bisexual in like a Medium post or something like that. And she described her bisexuality as that she'd never really realized she was bi, but all of this controversy made her think about it. And she realizes that she's had some like really intense female friendships or something like that. And that she's like noticed pretty women or something. And it seemed very tepid, to put it mildly. But it is, again, this is what I mean about this one drop thing, where suddenly she's not appropriating because she falls on this side of this dividing line, this all important dividing line between the straight and the queer. And yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts about heated rivalry. The men look nice, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's obviously, I have not seen it yet, but like, yeah, I'd watch it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen it either, but I've absorbed commentary about it, and yeah, and apparently one of the guys has an amazing ass, so you might want to just check it out.
Okay, well,
like,
noted.
Based on that alone.
Yes, well, that is a fine quality to have amazing of, sure. Yes.
Well, I actually, this is years and years ago, I had Sarah Marshall on the show from You're Wrong About, and she mentioned that when she was a teen, she wrote Newsies fan fiction in which the Newsies characters, who are all teenage boys, were secretly in love with each other. And so this would have been in the 90s. And I think there is, well, it seems to me there is something about like a younger woman, like sublimating or something, her desire through like fictional man relation or teen boy relationships as a way of sorting through something that doesn't have like a mirror in the traditional.
I guess I also
male,
again like
experience.
kind of wonder. I mean, I think this is again one of these things where I'm wondering like how many of these things are just people overthinking it when it involves women, and how much is a real difference. Because I think there's a bit of both. Like, I think a woman who actually finds two men together attractive, this is just like a sex thought and falls into the category of sex thoughts. And yeah, I think women and men probably have different levels in the aggregate of sort of how filthy the thought might be. And like a lot will get remarked upon that, like when women talk about like a gay male scene, they're not picturing every single thing actual gay men might do together. I'm sure it depends which women and which gay men, but yeah, there's probably some truth to that. I do think though that there is something to be said about like when girls are not quite ready to date. And this was my own experience. Like when I was in high school, I knew I liked boys from a young age. I knew this, but I was not like mature enough to be actually like having boyfriends until I was maybe like 16 or so. And also the boys who were like 14, 15, 6 or like 14, 15, I'd say like the straight ones did not talk to girls. They could not talk to girls. They didn't have it in them. This was, again, I should say, at a math and science high school, I should spell out. And they were very, very geeky. Everybody involved was extremely geeky. The only boys I would talk to often would turn out to be gay. Either I knew it at the time or I would later learn. Maybe they themselves would later learn. So when I was like younger, like early high school, my crushes tended to be on boys who I would later learn or already knew were gay because that's who talked to girls and because I did not actually want a boyfriend really. Like I wanted the idea of a boyfriend, but like the reality of it would have been more than I knew what to do with at that age. I did not then, once I became old enough to have boyfriends, I did not have some sort of thing for gay men. It was like that just went away because I didn't, that would have been a problem if a man was gay. You know what I mean? At the same time, I've never liked this sort of like super duper, like grunting type either. So, yeah, I don't know. That said, Taylor Swift's guy is, they got married, right? Or engaged or something?
They're engaged, yeah.
Engaged. He's
Travis
attractive,
Kelce.
even I don't hold it against him that he's a football player. I think Taylor Swift did okay, even though Harry Styles maybe would have been okay too. But
Well, I talked about this when I had our mutual friend, BD McClay on the show about, Taylor dated this string of artsy men who are almost all actors and musicians. And then the one she ended up with is this big, buff, seemingly dumb, handsome football player. And there's something, I don't know, there's something noteworthy there. We've gone a bit long, but there's one other thing I want to ask, which is about the Britcom aspect. And well, can you talk about why you included all the Britcom references and examples, but also I was interested in what do you think the difference is between American sitcoms and British sitcoms, such that British ones made better examples for your work? Is it just that you like British ones more? I was wondering if it was that British TV is more comfortable with putting ordinary looking people on screen than American TV is, or is there something in the British sensibility that more aligns with how you're viewing these things?
Sure. I mean, there's a very sort of roundabout way where like I just was watching a lot of this because it would help me fall asleep, like genuinely using it as like sleeping medicine. So I was watching a lot of this anyway. And I can't watch things without overthinking them. So I just started connecting it, and yes, I did start to notice that because of the way British TV shows, at least were, this may be changing a bit, at least how they were cast, ordinary people would be on TV, ordinary looking men and ordinary looking women. On American TV, not as much. You get maybe some ordinary looking men and a lot of extremely beautiful women. There was that whole cliche with all these think pieces about it at the time of like the schlubby sitcom husband who's he's no good. And then he's got this hyper achieving, very fit wife, right? Like that was, I know the theme song. I'm not going to start humming it, but I can't remember the name of the show. King of Queens.
Yes.
Okay. And there were a bunch like this, right? So what you get on a bunch of these British shows is this kind of a plain looking woman character played by a plain looking actress, right? And so there are two British actresses who really specialize in this. Janine Duvitsky from Waiting for God, and then also from Benidorm and a bunch of other things. And Selena Cadell, who is a sort of creepy desirer, both on I think it's the first ever Midsummer Murders, and then later on Doc Martin, which is like where she plays this pharmacist who's in love with Doc Martin.
Doc Martin is one of the few shows that you talk about that I've seen most of. And
so can you picture what I mean about that character?
I had to Google it, but once, she has a neck brace on.
The neck brace.
All the time.
Yeah, and I think what they're kind of,
Wait, did you know that there's an American adaptation of Doc Martin that just aired its first season?
No, I didn't know that.
It's with Josh Charles is playing the Doc Martin.
Oh, interesting.
surrogate.
Okay. Well, I'm not opposed to watching some television. I'll have to check that out. I wonder who they get to play the Selena Cadell character, though.
There is an older woman with a neck brace in the like 2-minute trailer that I watched. Okay. Yes.
But is it like Demi Moore? I don't know.
No, she looked like a character actress, kind of.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Look.
Yeah, so you do get this in some American television. You get I don't know if you ever saw Flight of the Conchords.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Mel, their super fan, is very similar to
Kristen Shaw.
Yes. Very similar character, also in that both of these characters have husbands, which I think is like a nice sort of sweet, gentle thing that they do for these characters. So it's not that they're like unloved by men. It's just that they're out of their mind. I mean, it's played as little nuts. And then there's
yes,
on Frasier, there's I think Julia Sweeney character in a few episodes. You've seen Frasier.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
There's a lot of it though. I don't remember the Julia Sweeney character.
There's some woman who sues Frasier to kind of date her, like she's going to blackmail him in some complicated way, and she's very plain looking, but she's in love with Frasier. And you do get this occasionally, and I give some American examples. Certainly Lena Dunham has played this type of role. But on the whole, what you get with the Britcoms is you get the visual of a woman who, when the lines say that no man wants this woman, you can kind of believe it. Even though, in real life, a lot of the time the woman has a husband, whatever, but you can believe it. Whereas I think in American shows, if you have a line about how, no man would ever want this woman, and the woman is played by Claire Danes, it's probably not true, maybe not everybody wants her, but
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a lot of it, but it's also, I think, to do with the way British comedy is, that there's just a certain kind of absurdity that they seem to be maybe okay with, at least comedy of that era, where they're both kind of making fun of the fact that no men want a woman, but Mrs. Slocum certainly falls into this, but they are still showing the woman. Whereas I think in American comedy, there'd be more reticence about you don't want to make a woman feel bad about her looks, so we're just not going to show the unattractive woman at all.
Mm.
Although you do get
like Maris on Frasier, who
certainly
did they ever actually show her on screen?
No, they don't. They don't show Maris ever.
Norm's wife on Cheers is the same.
Yes,
joke.
Absolutely. Tina Fey on 30 Rock, which is now back on Netflix, and I watched the first episode of, and holds up ish. But she plays the plain one, and then people were like, but she's not as plain as all that. But then next to Suri, yes, she is. So that was kind of the thing there.
Yeah.
But she's not super desiring, so it doesn't quite fit.
Right. I mean, she ends at various times she's with John Hamm and Matt Damon on that show.
Yes.
So there is that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think, let's see. Is there anything else you want to mention about the book or anything else before we wrap up?
I feel like I just covered probably all of it. I didn't talk about sitcom. We didn't talk about the Seinfeld thing.
Let's spend at least 3 minutes
we don't have to, but there
Seinfeld.
is a Seinfeld reference. There's many Seinfeld references.
Well, there's the one about...
There's the himbo, the mimbo. The mimbo's
yes,
in
the
there.
mimbo, and then the, a woman's body is a work of art, a man's body is utilitarian.
If you're interested in Seinfeld, there is Seinfeld stuff in there, because I don't want to give the impression that this is only about these British shows. There is some American.
Did your editor or anyone push back on going so deep into these shows that maybe in Canada it's different. Because it's
No,
more
no,
of
I
an
think it's
Anglo
too.
connection. But
I think everybody thinks it's too much about Britcoms, but
okay, because
like
I've
everybody
in
thinks
reading
this.
you're constantly mentioning this thing
Yes,
Benidorm, and I finally
yes,
Googled Benidorm, and I was like, oh, it's like a like that's the name of a place,
yeah.
Benidorm.
Benny Dorm, yeah, it just that's kind of happenstance because I was watching it probably while writing and I was thinking a lot about the show. And I also think that one of the main characters is extremely attractive, which nobody else practically gets because he's kind of strange looking. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was like, I feel like I had a choice. Either I'm trying to talk about real people and doing it in this kind of guarded way and seeing, or I'm trying to, but what I was trying to get at was these dynamics and how they can be visualized. And I wasn't like, and there was no other way to describe it except these things on screen. And I had to just write it for a reader who has not necessarily seen any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten surprisingly a lot of, and maybe it's people being polite, feedback of like, I've never seen any of this. I didn't think I would find this tolerable, but actually it's really getting at something. I have also gotten the feedback of like, there's a lot about Britcoms in here and these are old shows and whatever. But the strangest feedback I've had, but also the one that makes me most happy, I'd say, is that like different people respond to different parts of the book and are like, so this is really a book about, and they name which chapter, and it's like they're all saying different chapters, right? So I feel like that is kind of what I was getting for the sort of balance, like different parts might speak to different people. So if you don't care about himbos of sitcom, you maybe skip that one, but if that's all you care about, maybe you skip the part about like the, post-pandemic divorce lit. Because these are different things. Or maybe, there may be some overlap of interest, but yeah, not infinite. That's fair.
Right. But I mean, this is not like it's just a collection of essays or something that is brought together in a book. Like there's an argument or an overarching theme and argument throughout. So I think it works. It works as a cohesive book.
Thank you.
And yeah, and I mean, maybe like BritBox should like run a contest or something like related to this book, or have
they should at least give me a free subscription,
a paid spokesperson for
I feel
them
like
or
I'm
something.
Kramer, like where Kramer always settles for like the part of the thing he's being offered in these lawsuits.
Yes.
I feel like it'd be like a free lifetime subscription to BritBox, and I'd be like, I'll take it.
Right. They offer when he spills coffee on himself, they offer him
yes.
a lifetime of free coffee, and he sticks out his hand and says, "I'll take it." Okay. Well, and so this book came out is a Canadian Penguin Random House Canada published.
That's right.
But it is available in America.
Absolutely on Amazon and elsewhere in America. Very much so. Yeah.
And yeah, so a link will be in the show notes to where people can buy this. So congratulations again on the book. I enjoyed it. It made me laugh. It seems like it's like you got your personality and worldview into this book.
For better or worse, yes.
Yes, in a way that as someone who knows you a little bit, it feels like it comes through.
Okay.
Okay, so so you mentioned at the top all the various
those are all the things,
jobs you have in media outlets.
Yes.
Is there anywhere else you would point people who want to?
They can follow me on Substack is the best place because that's kind of where everything's collected. I am also on Blue Sky and Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much, but I did not delete my account or whatever. I think it's Bovy Maltz on Twitter, like all one word. And I'm sure it's something on Blue Sky. What is it on Blue Sky? It's at phoebebovy.bsky.social.
Right.
If you want to follow me there, and
close reading the reruns is the name of your Substack.
Yes, and for the Canadian Jewish News, I also have a podcast there called The Jewish Angle, and I think that's the Globe and Mail. Yes,
and you have a public Instagram account.
I do. That's right. Oh my goodness! Thank you for mentioning that. I am so honored that you would remember this. I learned from can we call her also friend? Has she been on your podcast, Lee Stein, or
Oh
is she a
yes,
friend of
yes.
the pod? Okay,
She's
I
been
thought so.
multiple
I
times
thought
as
she could
well.
be. Yes, that's what I thought. Okay, so I can say friend of the pod,
Yeah.
mutual friend of mutual pod. Lee Stein advised me during a Substack live to just make a public Instagram because I need one for books stuff. And even though I didn't before publication, I have now. So I have. It's not just for book stuff. It is like that's just going to basically be my like non-kid photo type Instagram. If I remember to use it. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at, I think it's like phoebe.maltz.bovy is the handle. I went really creative.
Yeah. You haven't gotten a unity of username across platforms, but that's harder to
Oh,
do
I
in
hadn't even thought about
this
this. I
splintered
have
era.
no such
Yeah, because you were
skills.
tweetertation on
I was
Twitter originally.
tweetertation, and then I deleted the account. I was verified when I was tweetertation in
Yes.
old school. Yes, yes. But I will
Before
not digress into Twitter
Yeah,
Twitter
before-
lore. But yes,
before the regime changed. And so I do have unity of username across platforms, and it's RACW.
yeah.
I'm only on Blue Sky at this point. Okay, well, thank you, Phoebe, for coming on. People should check out the book. People can also rate and review this show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever that helps the show. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Ari.